Scams cost older Americans almost $3 billion a year. Unfortunately, seniors can be easy prey for scammers. Tonight on The Best Times, you'll find out how to protect yourself. And we'll examine one of the greatest risk factors for disease, smoking. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you. Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. We've all gotten one of those phone calls. It looks like a local number, so we answer it, only to find out it's one of those infuriating robocalls. We immediately hang up, which is the right thing to do, because that robocall is only trying to scam us. Seniors are a particular target for scammers, and it's estimated that it costs older Americans almost $3 billion a year. The best way to fight back is to be alert to scams against seniors. Let's talk about the current scams that you're seeing in the Memphis area. What's out there?
You know, we talked earlier, before, about robocalls. So many of the scams are peddled via robocalls.
They're so frustrating.
The one that actually we put out some alerts out recently, there's just a spate of them. The Federal Communications Commission put out an alert, the Federal Trade Commission put out an alert, is something that we call, everybody calls a one-ring call.
I've gotten them from Nigeria.
Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Mauritania, I forget some of the other countries. But it's an interesting scam in that they're trying to get you to call them back. And most people don't, but the phone will ring once or twice. And people look at their caller ID and the curious, they count on a certain percentage of people being curious, calling it back. It looks like it's probably a U.S. number, may even be an 809 is the Dominican Republic, and maybe some people think, well, that's an 800 number, toll free. In fact, when you call these numbers, it's a toll call, you're hit with a charge immediately, and then they do everything they can to keep you on the line talking about whatever they're talking about, because the charges are accruing. And the charge will end up showing up on your phone bill. There's ways that they can get them on the phone bills, and you end up paying a pretty heavy toll.
But does that toll go to the scammers? How do the scammers make the money?
The answer is yes. The phone companies are required to provide basically billing services for certain third parties. I assume they vet some of them, but I think some of them they don't. And the answer is no. When the charge gets on your phone bill, I think the phone companies may get a cut, but most of the income goes to the scammers. For years, probably the number one scam reported to the Better Business Bureau, to the Federal Trade Commission, other law enforcement agencies, were crooks calling, impersonating the IRS and saying to people, you didn't pay your taxes or something else, and if you don't pay immediately and they want you to pay by some funky means like wiring the money or a gift card,
yes.
We're coming to arrest you. The good news is, a few years ago, the international authorities, including in India, busted like 15 call centers in India where most of those calls originated from, and the number of calls dropped precipitously. They started to pick back up, but what we're now seeing is people calling saying they're from Social Security, not the IRS, Social Security, and saying for some reason your Social Security benefits are in jeopardy. Or if you provide us some confidential personal information, your benefits will go up. And people provided, and then they said they're subject to identity theft.
Well, let's make one thing clear since you're talking about the IRS and Social Security. They're not going to call you out of the blue, correct?
They're in very rare cases, generally only when you've called them for some reason. And they're certainly, the IRS in particular is not going to call you, and first time you hear it, you're about to be arrested.
Yes.
You're going to get letters, you're going to get notices. And the real red flag, it's always interesting, disheartening, is you would like people to understand they're not going to do that, but if they get past that defense, then when they say, now, the way you need to pay this fine or this fee or whatever is through an iTunes gift card or an Apple gift card, you'd kind of like people to stop and think, why does the IRS or Social Security want me to pay something using that? But the crooks just rely on people's kind of emotions outstripping their common sense.
One you told me about was involving bogus products. You mentioned dietary supplements, so tell me about that.
The Federal Trade Commission is very active in busting companies that peddle what are mostly dietary products with outrageous, unsubstantiated claims about their ability to treat, in many cases, serious diseases. Most recent one, just in the past month or so, they busted a company peddling a product called Geniux, 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 that they claimed would improve cognitive functioning. And the FTC, these are the allegations the FTC landed. They said, first of all, it doesn't do what they say it does. They were creating fake news websites, making it look like these products were being analyzed and reported on news websites, which would add an air of legitimacy. They had phony consumer testimonials. They claimed that people like Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, now deceased, but Bill Gates and Stephen Hawking used it, two obviously brilliant guys. And they had bogus free trial offers, and some of the claims, they referred to Geniux as Viagra for the brain, increase IQ up to 100%, increase focus up to 300%. It was $47 to $57 a bottle. The FTC got a judgment of $26 million, tells you how big the bucks are involved in these scams. And the other thing is, however, all they could collect was $600,000 because all the rest of it had been spent.
Well, it just shows you the kind of things that they do to prey upon the 50-plus population.
Well,
improve your memory.
And in that case, that's just about, but there have been other actions by the FTC on marketers of dietary supplements that they claimed would treat opioid addiction, help people get off of opioids. Others that were also cognitive function that they said would improve people's brain power, improve kids' ability to learn in school, thwart the ravages of Alzheimer's disease. Another one that was supposedly going to be able to treat the side effect of chemotherapy, a wasting disease that is often a side effect, plus, again, memory loss. And one of the more recent ones, in addition to this Geniux deal, was a product called NoBetes that purported to treat or to substitute for prescription drugs and insulin in the treatment of diabetes. So NoBetes, obviously, sort of to tell you. Okay. And again, these are all products that were sold on mainstream stores, mainstream websites.
You mentioned prescription drugs. I have read articles about mostly online companies selling really bogus prescription drugs. You have no idea what you're getting, correct?
That's right. And many of these are originate overseas. I don't remember the exact statistics, but I think it was the National Board of Pharmacy did a study or a review of like thousands of websites. I think there's like 10 or 11,000 websites that peddle prescription drugs online, and they found an alarmingly high percentage that were not registered as they needed to be with the licensing boards, that the products came from China or whatever. Doesn't mean it's a bad product, but there's sometimes a correlation there. And then in many cases they were tainted. And so, we and the authorities really recommend, there are legitimate online pharmacies, and the mainstream brick and mortar pharmacies generally sell online. But one of the things you can look for is, it's called the VIP seal, Verified Internet Pharmacy something or other, VIPs, that indicates that it is a legit outfit. But again, part of the problem with the people need to understand, back on the dietary supplements, is the government does not review and approve those ahead of time like they do a drug.
Right, it's not regulated in the same way.
After the fact, if the Federal Trade Commission or the FDA finds them making bogus claims, then they'll land on them, but they're not approved ahead of time. They're generally just vitamins and amino acids and enzymes and that sort of thing. Some have been proven to have benefits, but some haven't. They're not allowed to market them as promoting treatment for a disease. And again, in some of those, just like the prescription drugs, they've been found to have ingredients in them that are not listed on the label, in some cases that are tainted, and even products that are natural, depending on your health, depending on other medications you take, they may not interact properly. Before you take any dietary supplement, number one piece of advice, check with your doctor and ask them, what do you think? Is it okay if I take this?
How can we protect ourselves against these fakes? Because fakes come not only dietary supplements, not only prescription drugs, but just merchandise, things that you would buy. They're counterfeit.
Probably the number one thing is just kind of examine the website, and most of the counterfeits that we're talking about are sold online. Look at the website. I can't tell you how many beautiful websites I see, beautiful pictures, not always, but beautiful pictures that you can't find a physical address. You can't find a phone number. The only way that you can contact them, if you need to contact them, if you have a problem, if you want a refund, is you've got to go on some form online and fill in your information and hope they're going to contact you. So look for that sort of information. If prices are too good to be true, that is, although sometimes the prices are comparable to what you would expect them to be. Certainly check the company out with the Better Business Bureau, and if we've got a bad record on them or don't have a record on them, factor that into online reviews. And just really pay with a credit card. At least if you pay with a credit card,
you got some protection.
You have some recourse if later something goes wrong, and you can demonstrate that in fact it was a fraudulent sale.
We've been talking a lot about the digital world and digital related scams. Are there still the sweepstakes scams that come in the mail?
Sweepstakes, Nigerian letters, all the
They're
old.
still there.
The basic scams in many cases stay the same, but the crooks just update the story. They try to follow the headlines sometimes, but they'll update the story. They'll update the technology. You know, the sweepstakes scams, these Nigerian letter scams, romance scams, a particular problem for seniors. They tend to, in many cases, particularly women, tend to be the most vulnerable to these romance scams. And you just want to go slow, and you kind of want to look at the websites, and you kind of want to, again, I always advise, slow down, don't let your emotions get too far out in front of your common sense.
Well, let me ask you a question based off of that romance scam, because so many of the scams these days seem to be directed at the senior population. Why is that?
I'll tell you an interesting finding. The answer is yes. Many specific sorts of scams are targeted at seniors. Let me divert for a minute and say, however, we're starting to do studies, and other organizations are doing studies that are finding that young people are every bit as likely, and in some cases more likely, to fall for a scam. It's just that there are different scams and different stories and whatever, but back to the seniors, you know, they tend to be targeted, we tend to be targeted, in some cases, by just good old knocking on the door. Going to remove the branches from your roof, or, you know, clean up your yard or whatever, give you a great deal, pay me in advance. And part of that is because they're home and to answer the door. Part of it is because, frankly, we grew up at a time when you didn't really, were more trusting. You didn't worry that somebody on the other end of the phone or somebody knocking on the door, there was a high likelihood that they were going to try to scam you. So they're targeted for those sorts of scams. Some of them are based on the fact that in many cases seniors may be on fixed income, so they're looking for a good deal on prescription drugs. Or conversely, they own homes, they've got assets, let's try to take them in investment scams.
So What is your best advice to the seniors watching this show?
The interesting thing about the study I mentioned about who's a victim of scams and why, I think the title of it was a Better Business Bureau national study called The Illusion of Invulnerability, and the point was young people think they're invulnerable. Okay, they think, well, I'm not going to get scammed, I'm too smart for that. Even though, frankly, because of all the time they spend online and all the many scams that are perpetrated online, they tend to be victimized more. At the other end, it found that seniors, the good news is, in many cases, have sort of said, been there, done that, know that's a scam, okay? And don't fall for it, but still do enough. They're targeted in certain, and the other thing is the younger people, while they, in many cases, were victimized more, the amount they lost was relatively smaller. The scams targeting seniors, the romance scams, and all the lottery scams, sweepstakes, tended to be in the thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, again, we recommend slow down. If something seems too good to be true, that's why there's an old saying that says it probably is. Slow down. Don't let your emotions outstrip your common sense. Even if all through the process it sounds legitimate and you think I got to do something or you think I've won something and I'm going to collect, the minute they say wire me money or go buy an iTunes gift card or some other sort of gift card, stop. It is 100% a scam at that point.
Well, now, finally, if you find yourself a victim of a scam, your chances, of course, recovering money are probably minimal. But what should you do?
Well, we want to hear about it. We actually have an online service called Scam Tracker. You can go to Better Business Bureau website and click on a button that says Scam Tracker and really do two things. It's real kind of neat interactive heat map that you can drill down and you can see what kinds of scams are being reported in your neighborhood, down to your pretty much neighborhood, town, pretty much neighborhood. And in fact, if you get some call that sort of sounds legit, maybe you go on there and say, well, somebody else has already reported that is a scam. So you can not only see what's being reported, but then you can report it to us, fill out your own report, and then that allows us, if we see a pattern, we'll alert the media. Certainly on the FTC doesn't investigate individual cases like we may, but if they get enough information and enough reports, then they'll take action. And of course, they've got regulatory authority that we don't. So report to the FTC, report it to the Better Business Bureau, report it depending on the nature of the thing. If it gets into the realm of a true crime, report it to the police. Well, but don't be embarrassed to report it either. That's the other thing. A lot of times,
so many people are when they're taking a scam.
That's the other thing they rely on, that people are embarrassed, and when they feel that somebody's embarrassed, they just keep coming back. So it may be embarrassing, but don't be embarrassed. Report it, because at least you'll be helping other folks.
Well, thanks for helping us avoid getting scammed.
Thanks.
To protect yourself against scams, go to the Scam Alert page of the Federal Trade Commission's website, or visit the Scam Tracker on the website of the Memphis Better Business Bureau. I've done dozens of health segments for this show, and every doctor I've ever spoken with has identified smoking as one of the greatest risk factors for disease. The fact is, smoking shortens your life. It is the leading cause of preventable deaths in this country. And older people make up the largest percentage of smokers, with over 4 million smokers aged 65 plus. Let's find out more about smoking and your health. What are the health effects of smoking?
They range anywhere from cancers to circulatory problems. Lung cancer is by far and away the most well-known. Mouth and nose and throat cancer, esophagus cancer, stomach, pancreas, kidneys, bladder cancer, as well as bone marrow and blood cancers. Smoking tends to raise your blood pressure, and it also raises your heart rate. It narrows your blood vessels and also thickens your blood. So what this does is it actually ends up creating blood clots for a lot of folks. In addition, smoking is associated with diabetes. We know that the toxins in cigarette smoke actually lend to the development of type 2 diabetes and your ability to control your blood sugar. And it complicates a lot of the associated disorders that are associated with type 1 diabetes as well.
Is smoking more damaging to our health as we age?
As people get older, they have a lessened ability to fight infection, and smoking definitely exacerbates that. So you'll see a lot of older individuals who smoke getting chronic bronchitis, getting pneumonia, things like that. In addition, smoking contributes to other disorders that are known to affect older individuals, like dementia and Alzheimer's. Older individuals tend to have been smoking for a longer period of time, and the duration of time that you've smoked contributes to the development of all of the other diseases associated with smoking, like lung cancer, like circulatory and breathing problems.
What are the health gains of quitting smoking?
The health benefits associated with quitting smoking happen almost immediately. Within 20 minutes of stopping smoking, your blood pressure goes down. Within 12 hours of stopping smoking, your carbon monoxide levels in your blood return to normal. And then we have this other, the longer term, anywhere from 2 weeks to 9 months, we start seeing improvement in your lung function. Improvement in your cholesterol levels. And then if we're looking at really long-term effects from 1 year to 15 years, we see that individuals at 1 year, for instance, have half of the cardiovascular risk that they did when they were smoking. At 15 years, they are back to the cardiovascular risk they were when they were a non-smoker.
Are the gains as great for someone who has smoked for decades?
And the health benefits of stopping smoking are the same for everyone. So these effects that we see when people stop smoking will happen whether or not you have been smoking for 50 years or 2 years or 2 weeks. Your body will change and start to repair itself. We have a lot of individuals, patients of ours and folks who participate in our research studies who are over 70 who have quit smoking and say, wow, I didn't realize it was this easy. And I didn't realize how much better I would feel immediately. My energy is improved. I can breathe more easily. My skin looks better. And it's really, really remarkable.
Does genetics play a role in smoking?
There are genetic differences in people's propensity to start smoking and stay smoking. And there's also differences in people's response to therapy to stop smoking. That makes sense. And that could be medicinal therapy, like pharmacological therapy, like medicine, and it can also be behavioral therapy. So it's interesting, the way that we're made, the way that we're built really determines our responses to our environment across a host of different factors.
How can you quit?
What we find overwhelmingly with our patients is find your motivation to quit. Maybe it's health benefits, maybe it's cost, maybe it's because you have personal experience with someone with COPD and you've seen what that looks like, and maybe you just want to show your kids that it's possible to change, or the people around you, that you can make this change. Finding that motivation is really key to getting it done. I've found that once people get there, into that stage where they're motivated, they can use any method to quit.
What about e-cigarettes?
If you are using them as a cessation method to get yourself off of traditional cigarettes, there's a few issues. Number one, they have nicotine in them, so you're not really reducing your nicotine load, and it's delivered in the same way as a regular cigarette, so it's very addictive in that method of administration. In addition, you're engaging in that similar behavior to smoking a traditional cigarette. So in the psychology of addiction, that's not doing you any favors. Most of the folks that I know who go from cigarette smoking and celebrate that they've quit by using an e-cigarette, within 2 to 3 months are back to smoking those traditional cigarettes.
For more information about the effects of smoking and methods of quitting, go to the website of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Want more information about life after 50? Go online to watch more shows and find more resources. And send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Chris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you.